Good afternoon, this is Dominic with TheBackVlog. Pay no mind to the fact that this video is coming out in November. I'm actually shooting it on November 1st, and had I had access to the camera last night, my fiance had it at that point, you would have seen me in this video wearing my Halloween costume, because it would have been October 31st. However, that did not end up happening. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, I finished Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House from 1959, which I'm specifying the year because there is the 2018 Netflix adaptation, which I haven't seen. I'm not super familiar with the works of Shirley Jackson. This is the first thing I've actually read by her. I'm super intrigued by The Lottery in particular, but after hearing from a friend about other works of hers, I know that she is a person who I would definitely vibe with. So perhaps I will be on the lookout for that in the future. Having only read it once, there's definitely like a lot of stuff going on here. The writing is like very like cerebral and open-ended, and it's a little bit difficult to talk about because it seems like very open to interpretation, especially closer to like the end of the book. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. My first note here is that the initial description of the house is very imposing. The way Shirley Jackson writes it is like she personifies it and talks about the gargantuan nature of it, like, you know, how it towers over everything, giving it like a sense of impending doom or whatever. That's one of the things that initially reading this book definitely like stood out to me, just the monstrous nature in which the house is described is really well done. You know, obviously the premise of the book is a group of characters basically taking a leave to Hill House and really exploring the supernatural nature of it, and investigating whether or not, you know, the things that happen there are merely a psychological phenomenon or if there's something really going on. And with that in mind, it's really fascinating how pretty much all of these characters are responding to their initial fears of the things that are going on, because there's a lot of humor to this book in the dialogue. Like, you know, they're cracking jokes and like responding to things in a very lighthearted nature. And it's really interesting to kind of consider the fact that maybe the way that they're responding to things is so they don't, it's to protect their own psyche, I think, so they don't basically like lose their minds and everything. It's super interesting the way that Shirley Jackson is kind of like expressing the fear of the characters through humor. And I'm wondering if that's like I wonder if that's a characteristic of her writing, like throughout her career. I'd be very interested in hearing about that or reading about that. The last note I have written here is Mrs. Montague, and this kind of goes back with my previous point. The main doctor's wife, she's basically a freaking cartoon character. Like, the way that she talks and just her vibe and her personality is like so over exaggerated, and like it really fits. She's so like in her own world and is very like headstrong, but like comedically so. She was a great character. All of these characters are great characters. That's pretty much all the notes I have written down, but you know, there's a few things I also want to talk about. As I said, how this book kind of explores the psychology of being in a haunted house, and the way that it seems to be going towards the end, where it kind of like started to get more like cerebral and open-ended. I thought it was going for like a Nicole Kidman The Others kind of thing, or like a Sixth Sense kind of thing. And it's not exactly like super clear, and it's really interesting because the introduction of the book was talking about how Shirley Jackson, the way that she wrote the book, is doing it in a way where it's kind of like emulating the psyche of the characters within the reader, where you don't really know if what's happening is really happening. And I don't know, it's kind of like hard to explain and like wrap my head around, because having only read it once and, you know, not really having read anything about it, I can only like go in with my own interpretation. And another thing that I know she tackles a lot in her writing is characters' relationships with social anxiety and other mental illnesses. And I think that's a really fascinating take as well. A fascinating takeaway. That's something I want to, you know, explore more in her catalog, but I don't really have anything else to say about The Haunting of Hill House. I know there's the Netflix adaptation, the Mike Flanagan Netflix adaptation, which I hear kind of does a really great job of accomplishing the same thing that Shirley Jackson does when it comes to kind of like getting under the skin of the reader / the viewer. I've heard that the narrative plot points are like different, but like the overall like atmosphere and vibe is very similar and very well done. So perhaps next year I will watch the Mike Flanagan Haunting of Hill House. But until then, that is my first reading of Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. Robin just sneezed. I don't know if you heard that.